Hey guys, I'm going to be teaching you about the three main types of orders that are commonly used when buying breakouts and the pros and cons of each of those. Now I warn you at the start of this video, it's going to be very in-depth, very in the weeds, very advanced, very technical. You're probably not going to see another video like this on YouTube, so you may have to watch it a couple of times for the information to sink in, because I'm going to explain some concepts that you have probably never heard about before. So we're going to be applying it to a VCP, which is Cirrus Logic, and I'll be teaching you about these different types of orders, initial stop loss placement, then going into the mitigation side of things, so free rolling the trade as well. Later on in the video I will come over to Melly, which is a trade that I'm currently in, so you can see the thought process that I apply on a day-to-day basis in my own trading as well. I'll pop up here the MarketSmith data for Melly, who are the video sponsor, and you can see Melly just hitting on pretty much all of the CAD Slim criteria. High quality growth funds coming in, huge earnings, huge sales coming in, really good earnings per share for the next couple of years as well, and a breakout year for the earnings per share. So we'll come back to Melly a little bit later on in the video, but let's start here with Cirrus Logic. So first and foremost, there are 4 parts to every single trade. Now this video is going to deal with the first 3 parts, which is going to be identify, control, mitigate, and then the 4th part is optimize. So first and foremost, you have to identify a high quality setup, and that is subject to whatever your setup criteria is. So if you're looking for breakout patterns, you're probably looking for flags, VCPs, cup and handles, Darvis boxes, wedges, pennants, whatever, right? Whatever your setup criteria is, you got to identify what a high quality setup is. When you have then identified the high quality setup, this is where we start moving into kind of the crux of this video. How do you go about entering a position? How do you go about controlling the risk? How do you go about free rolling the position as well? So with Cirrus Logic here, we've got 1 contraction, 2 contraction, and then 3 contraction, and we actually have a mini VCP building in here. So you could actually look at this more so as a cup and handle, and then you have some VCP action going on within the handle. See 1 contraction, 2 contraction, then tight, tight, tight. Now these are what I call trigger bars. You see these final 2 bars over here? These are what I call trigger bars. So this to me is that final piece of the proverbial jigsaw puzzle. Really tight bars. See how the volume just dries way up below the 30 bar average on that final bar. You've got a strong RS line as well. This is a 10 out of 10 setup. Okay, this is a fantastic VCP setup. It's an absolute textbook one. So okay, now we've got to identify where are you looking to enter. So for me, I invariably use the higher the trigger bar. So when I'm then looking for an entry, I'm looking for it around $7.95. I do not need to wait necessarily until $8. Now because there's only 5 cents between that, you could do that, but invariably I like to use the high of the trigger bar, so then I can keep my risk control even tighter, because my expectation is, well, if price moves through the high of the trigger bar, it's probably likely to go powering through the high of this base. So why do I not try and get in as early as possible and then keep my risk control tighter, which then means I can free roll, mitigate the risk on the trade quicker. As I said, we're going to be going into the weeds here. So then when you're looking at this, again, I'm actually just going to move this chart back like that. So let's do it as though we are looking at it like this, and hopefully that kind of makes sense. So there are 3 types of orders mainly people use when buying breakouts. That is market orders, it is buy stop orders, and it is buy stop limit orders. So let me just give you an overview of what each of those orders are. So the first one, a market order. That is basically you are just saying, I want to buy X amount of shares at the market right now. Just right now. So you may be looking at this, okay, and you've got it loaded up on your screen. You have an alert set at, say, $7.95. So then price starts moving through that level, the alert goes off, and then you go, right, quick, I'm typing it in. I'm gonna put an order, and I'm buying X amount of shares now. I'm buying 100 shares, 1,000 shares, or 10,000 shares, and I'm buying it right now. And that there, I don't think is very optimal, because you haven't really planned your trade out. What if price is now up here at, say, $8.60 by the time your order goes in, and suddenly you get a load of slippage on your order, and you were trying to buy it around $7.95 or closer to $8ish, but now you've just bought it up here at around $8.60, so you've bought it around about 8% above the pivot. Your risk versus reward on the trade is now just skewed. How you were thinking about mitigating the risk is now just whack. It's just completely off. But maybe more realistic, actually, you get filled, you're quicker on the trigger, and you get filled down here at $8.20 or maybe $8.40. And again, it may be you were in a meeting at work, you were having lunch somewhere, so the order goes off. You then have to load up your laptop, and then you're loading up your screen. It's off like, oh crikey, it's going. FOMO's kicking in. You're panicking. Oh, quick order, buy. You rush in. There's it's FOMO, you're emotional, you think you're missing out on the trade, the risk versus reward is all whack. If I haven't described that well enough, you can see I do not think that is an optimal way. And everything I try and do with my trading is bring it back down to optimizing performance. So that there is probably not a very good way to be buying a breakout. Let me then talk about the second way, right? Which is buy stops. So what on earth is a buy stop? Well, I want to give you an example. So a buy stop is basically an order that then turns into a market order. So let's say you have a buy stop, and think of the buy stop as the trigger price. So you have a buy stop at $7.95, which basically means if price goes above $7.95, a market order is going to go to the market. But this is not optimal because of gaps. Okay, so it can be effective, but what if it's a much thinner stock and you get a lot of slippage, or the buy stop, the trigger price can be triggered if price gaps up. So what if price gapped up to $8.60? So you thought, well, I was thinking of buying it closer to $8-ish. Now I've got filled at $8.60. So actually I was expecting to be filled within kind of a couple percent of the pivot, but now I'm filled up here. I'm filled 8% above the pivot. If price whips back down to the pivot point, which again, in more cases than not, that's going to happen, suddenly you get filled up here and you've got an 8% loss on your hands already, and price is just testing the pivot. Doesn't sound very optimal. What if, and again, just use this kind of hypothetical, what if you were thinking about buying it here? So you were thinking about buying, I'm going to use a buy stop. Okay, prices pull back down to the 21 EMA over here. Okay, nice. So I'm actually just going to put a specific reading in here. So you go, right, price is pulling back down to the 10 EMA, 21 EMA here. Volume is dried up. This is not a fantastic setup by any stretch of the imagination. It's just for this video. So you go, right, I'm going to put a buy stop in, because if price goes above $6.78, if price goes above this level, then I want to be filled, because the stock is going to be breaking out, could be taking out these highs here. So yeah, I don't want to be in here. Well, price gaps up to here. So suddenly you're filled around 9.3% higher, because this is where the open is. The price gaps. So your buy stop now turns into a market order, and you're going to be filled at the next available price. So then you get filled up here at closer to, what's that, $7.72, 9% above where you were kind of intending to get filled. Now your trade management is just completely whacked. Okay, it's not how you visualize the trade playing out. And again, you could then go, it just creates emotion, because you're like, well, hang on a minute, I was supposed to be filled down here, now I'm filled up here. What am I going to do? And this stock pushed up for a couple of days and then it pulled back down. But quite often you can see stocks kind of gap up like this and then just turn around and come straight back down to the pivot, and then suddenly you're getting stopped out. If I'm not explaining it well enough, I apologize, but that there is not an optimal way. So what is a more optimal way? And this is what I'm going to explain to you. Now, depending on where you are, and obviously this is not financial advice, I have no idea what I'm talking about, I use interactive brokers mainly, and I use them because they have buy stop limit orders. Now I'm in the UK and there are many brokers that have good order functionality. So I would say when you are doing your research on which broker you want to use, obviously you want a broker that is very competent, but the order functionality for me is very high up on my list. They have to have good order functionality and they have to have buy stop limit orders. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult. So what on earth is a buy stop limit order? If you've read Stan Weinstein's book, okay, he talks about buy stop limit orders. When Nicholas Darvis, I'm sure many of you read that book, How I Made $2 Million in the Stock Market, when Nicholas Darvis was gallivanting all over the world, okay, and he was using telegrams, I think it was telegrams, to communicate with his broker, maybe it was a different word, but when he was communicating with his broker, what orders was he using? He was using buy stop limit orders and attaching a stop loss. So what I should actually write here is buy stop limit orders and attach a stop loss. This is how I buy 99% of my trades. Okay, it is buy stop limit orders and I am attaching a stop loss to it. So what on earth is a buy stop limit order, and why do I think it is more effective than using market orders or buy stop orders? Well, it all comes back to defining your risk, controlling your risk and planning out the trade. So I very much like to plan my trade out in advance to the greatest extent that I possibly can. So Let's get into it. $7.95. That is the pivot for me. The pivot being the buy point. This is where I want to be buying the stock. So what I'm going to do, and it depends on the market for where I want to put my limit. Okay. So in this market environment, at the time of filming it, it's the 1st of April, but for the Q1 of this year, it's still been a pretty choppy, pretty hostile market environment. Okay. So I want to get filled max within 1% of the pivot, but actually more recently, I've been doing it 0.5%, 0.5% of the pivot. So I know where I'm going to get filled. So let me just put this in here. So we're going to put this, now this percentage reading at 7.95, and this is going to be pretty darn tight. Let me just, for the purpose of this video, let's do it as a percent, 803. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just put this in 803. So let me explain the order to you. So this is the buy stop with the limit. So what does the limit mean? The limit means that is the maximum amount I am willing to pay for any shares, $8.03. So my fill range is going to be between $7.95 and $8.03. So that means I know the maximum amount that I'm going to be paying. I'm just going to move this over here. The maximum amount I'm going to be paying for any shares. Okay, so therefore I can control my risk. Now, for me, in terms of my stop loss, I'm invariably going underneath the low of the trigger bar and or recent lows. Maybe that ties in with one or more key moving averages. It kind of depends how the stock is setting up. But here, I'm going to go underneath the low of the last 2 bars. So when I'm planning out the trade, the identify part is very closely linked with the initial controlling a risk part, which is then very closely linked with the mitigation part, the free rolling. Now, I said this video is going to be in the weeds. It's going to be in the weeds. So if I work back, so if I go, right, if I get filled at $7.96, what is my stop loss, or $7.97? And then if I pull this down to $7.84, like this in here, let me see if I can do it there. My stop loss is going to be 1.72%. This then really helps me when we come on to the risk mitigation part in a minute. But my stop loss is going to be 1.72%. Now, if I then look at where my limit is, 803. So I'm then just going to change this. So let's imagine we don't get filled at $7.97. Let's imagine we get filled at 803. My stop loss max is going to be 2.4% because I'm attaching a stop loss to my buy stop limit order. Okay, so therefore I now know what is the maximum risk I'm going to have on this position with shares. Now, again, if the stock is thinner, if the stock is moving really quickly through, you may not get filled with all of your intended shares. That can happen, but again, that's absolutely fine. By my book, it's actually a good sign. If I don't get filled with all of my intended shares, it probably means there's a lot of demand out there. The stock is moving very quickly and it's very hard for the broker to buy shares within my limit range. So it's actually seen as a bit of a positive. If you don't get filled with your whole intended kind of order size, it can actually be a good thing because price is moving really quickly through that level. But now I know, okay, my stop loss is going to be somewhere between 1.7% and 2.4%. Now that really helps me because I do all of my work the night before when the market is closed. So I'm then looking for setups like this, the nice tight trigger bars coming through in the context of a flag, a cup and handle, a VCP, a Davis box, whatever is being built. Okay, I'm then looking for this and I'm planning everything out in advance. So I'm not doing this when the market's open. I've got orders pinging, alerts pinging off, and this is going, that's going, that's turning around, that's going. I don't want to do that, right? Calmness, poise, as Livermore would call it. So I'm planning everything out the night before. Okay, before the market opens, I know what I'm doing. I'm entering my orders in with my broker. Help if I could talk on it. That's my stutter. So buy stop limit order, attaching the stop loss in. This is how I'm thinking about it. This is how I'm planning it out. So let's imagine we do this. Now, what I also do, okay, to really kind of confuse you, is if I then get filled in the position, I'm then using a sell limit order to sell 1/3 of my position invariably at 2 times. It could be where my initial stop loss is, or it could be to where my new stop loss might be going to. And that's what I'm going to show you on the Melly trade a little bit later on in this video. But right here, as we look at it, it's going to be quite hard to push up this initial stop loss any higher. Had my initial stop loss been down here, say, at $7.73, then I could be looking to free roll at 2 times where the percentage stop would be for $7.84. If I'm confusing you, it's probably because you've never heard things like this explained before. As I said, you may have to watch it a couple of times. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to explain this concept, pushing up the stop loss to then free roll on Melly. But right here, what I would then be doing is going, okay, so I know I'm going to get filled max at 803. So I have to work out my free roll levels. So how you do that is, or how I do that is I go, right, what is 2 times my worst case scenario in terms of the maximum I'm willing to pay for any shares? So that would be 2.4%. So what I've got to do is go 2 times that from 803, because I know that's the limit, okay, on my buy stop order. So that's the limit. So what I'm going to do is just pull this up, and we're going to go to around about 4.8, and I want to be underneath whole dollar, half dollar number. So this is absolutely fine because it's $8.42. It's also free rolling underneath the high of this. It's not quite underneath the high of this base. That would be very difficult to do, but you do want to look left. I think I did that in one of the recent videos, the coaching video I posted. If you want to go and look at that, about kind of looking left, thinking about free roll places. So what we're going to do is I'm then going to have a sell limit order, which is saved but not into the market. Okay, so I just save it in my kind of order area, because then I know, right, if I get filled at 803, then I'm going to be looking to free roll by selling 1/3 of the position at $8.42, because this is going to be 1/3 at 2 times stop. Let me put it in capitals. Stop loss. Help if I could type a 4-letter word, wouldn't it? That's how I'm thinking about the trade. Now, again, this is very, very in-depth. You probably never heard it explained like this. So let's just rewind a little bit. So market orders, I just think it's very difficult to know where are you going to get filled. How are you then planning your trade out to control risk and mitigate risk? Why is that important? Well, you want to be controlling your risk. Obviously, you want to be looking, because you want to lose the least amount possible when you're wrong, and you're probably going to be wrong more times than you are right. So it's very important to have small losses, and ideally take those small losses quickly. If I'm wrong, I want to get stopped out pretty much on the day or the day after actually entering a position, because I'm not tying my capital up. We've all been there where we've then held losing trades for months and years and years and years and years, and then you've got to look at it every day. If I'm wrong, I just want to get stopped out really quickly. Great, I can reassess. Maybe the stock sets back up. Maybe there's a better stock setting up, or maybe I come back to this stock a week after, or a couple weeks. Maybe there's a shakeout demand tail, it resets a couple of weeks. Mitigation of risk is really important. So what is risk mitigation? It's basically removing the risk on the trade. So invariably, I'm looking to sell 1/3 of my position at 2 times where my initial stop loss is, or where my new stop loss is, which I'm going to explain on the Melly trade, okay, in a couple minutes time, maybe 5 minutes time, right? Because I tend to ramble in these videos. So then I want to be risk free on the trade with the majority of my position. So I'll still have 2/3 that are now there effectively risk free, subject to a lot of slippage, gap downs, all of that stuff, to then go and try and ride the intermediate term trend. So then my mindset is, right, I'm now there risk free. Can I get a 20% move, a 50% move, a 100% move? How far does this stock want to go? And can I sit there for the trend? Remember, buying right and sitting tight is very uncommon, as Livermore would say. So this is how we are thinking about it. I kind of lost my train of thought there. Apologies about that. So what I'm doing here is going, okay, this is kind of the worst case scenario, because I'm going to get filled at 803. So then those shares there, I'm going to be looking to free roll by selling 1/3 at $8.42, and my stop loss is going to be at $7.84. That's the worst case scenario. Obviously, I may get filled a little bit lower. I may get filled at somewhere between $7.95 and $8.03. So maybe I get filled at $7.99 or $8.01. So again, I will have it in my head, those kind of levels I need to be free rolling. So suddenly, if my order gets filled and I'm invariably sat here and I'm watching the market kind of open in the first couple of hours, I'm kind of seeing what is going on. Am I filled? Am I not filled? So on and so forth. But then all I've got to do is then go, right, well, actually, I didn't get filled at 803. I got filled at 801. So actually, I don't now need to wait for $8.42. I can now free roll at $8.35 or whatever the level is. Okay, but I have got this saved, the sell limit order saved, not submitted. There's a difference. Saved, not submitted. So if I get filled, I'm then pressing the order entry to submit it. So then I have a sell limit order into the market. As I said, this is going to be an in-depth video, right? So on this bar here, okay, my entry, let's just imagine my entry, I get filled at 803, like this, at the top of where my limit was. And then what's happening here is I'm selling 1/3 at 2 times where my stop loss is, okay, in here. So I'm selling 1/3 in here. So I have now free rolled the trade. So now I free rolled it. It's about, can I sit for the intermediate term trend to play out with the other 2/3 of my position? Let me flick back over to Melly and you will see this. This is a recent trade at the time of filming this. I'm still in this trade. So this is Melly here. Nice VCP action, as I showed you with the Market Smith data, hitting a lot of the cancelling boxes. I think this stock has huge growth ahead of it, and I think it may be kind of a market leader in the next bull market. Maybe that started, maybe it hasn't started. Either way, Melly is acting very well, which is what I care about more. 1 contraction, 2 contraction, 3 contraction, getting nice and tight on the 50 SMA with this little shakeout demand tail, low volume. This is the first pullback to the 50 SMA. It's kind of an O'Neill principle as well. I'm expecting large operators to step up and support the stock. There's been a couple which have been supported, kind of TMLs, Airbnb around the 50 SMA, Tesla around its 50 SMA. So I was looking for Melly to do something similar. Now, if you're buying through these tight trigger bars, quite often you can easily be a day or two early. So there's the patience element as well. So let me explain Melly. So I'm targeting, so this shakeout demand tail here, let me go back in time, okay? This shakeout demand tail here. I'm targeting an order through the high. So that is 1197.26, and then I'm placing my stop loss underneath the low of that bar at 1161.47. Now that turned out to be around about 3% risk. So then I'm looking to free roll at about a 6% gain. However, if any of you played sport at a high level, or you're an avid golfer or whatever, you will know things change. Okay, you could be stood, to use a golf analogy, you could be stood on the 7th hole, and on when you were playing the 6th hole, you were playing into a 30-mile-an-hour headwind, okay, and then you were expecting a tailwind on the 7th hole. So imagine it was a par 3, so you were thinking, I'm gonna hit a 6-iron here, but then suddenly, okay, it turns around, the wind turns around. So instead of having a 30-mile-an-hour tailwind, you're now playing into that same headwind you were just playing on the 6th hole. Do you still hit your 6-iron? Probably not. You're going to have to club up to kind of allow for the wind that you are playing into. So instead of hitting a 6-iron, maybe you're bringing out the 4-iron. Maybe you're having to bring out a 5-wood or something like that. Maybe even 3-wood into a 30-mile-an-hour headwind. So this is how I'm initially kind of planning out the trade. Now let me talk you through my thought process. So let me just pull this up. So saying here, something like this, okay? So 6% is into pretty much the highs of the base here. So I was looking to free roll just underneath and then adjust the stop loss. So imagine that I'm then looking to free roll, so that's sell limit order at 1267.27. That's how I'm planning the trade out. Okay, first day. I get filled in here, and I'm going to explain where I got filled. I'm actually just going to I'll play it forward. So I got filled in here at 1201.19. Now that there was 0.33% within the pivot, and the pivot for me was 1197.26. So it was within 0.5%, as you're going to see. Now the next bar that comes in, and I'll explain this upper red line in a second, you then get this really nice trigger bar coming through. Then on this day here we go. On this day here, price starts to move out. So what I actually did, let me just move it forward like this. So what I then did, this is this 0.33. I know I'm jumping around a little bit. So you see 1197.26, that there's the pivot point. So I got filled at 1201.19. So that there is where my entry is. And I had my limit on the buy stop, I think it was around like 1203, something like that. So you can see that 0.5%. So this was where my limit was, but I got filled here. So I got filled within the limit. So as price starts moving out on this day here, let me just remove that. So as price starts moving out on this day here, I go, well, hang on a minute. I've now got an opportunity to free roll here because it was kind of gapping up on the open. So I went, well, why don't I move my stop loss from where it is to here, sell 1/3 here. So then I've got the 2/3 stop loss here and I free rolled the trade. I've now got no risk on the trade. I've mitigated the risk on the trade. So I now have 2/3 of the position there risk free that I can now look to try and ride an intermediate term trend. That is where I want to be as soon as prudently possible. So I will wrap the video up there, but hopefully it is useful for you in terms of thinking about different orders, the pros and cons of different orders. As I said, the first two, I don't think there's many kind of pros there. I think there's way more cons than pros. For me, as I said, I use a buy stop limit order in the vast majority of cases, attaching a stop loss, and then I know where I'm then having a sell limit order because I'm working it all out the evening before the market closes at 9 p.m. my time in the UK, the US market that is. So I'm planning everything out the day before, the evening before, for when the market opens the following following day. I'm a bit of a night owl, so I work better at kind of 10 p.m, 11 p.m. at night. So I'm planning this all out, thinking about kind of different scenarios for how do I want to control risk, where am I looking to mitigate risk. But then I am also open to the fact, well, there may be a more prudent opportunity to be able to free roll the position by pushing up my stop loss and then selling 1/3 to protect the kind of the remaining 2/3 of the position. So hopefully that there makes sense. If you want to learn much more about this, I do have a membership site. We do live coaching sessions every Tuesday and Thursday currently. There's over 100 hours of educational content. You can join in, you can actively participate in the Zoom calls. I think that would be very beneficial for you if you have kind of questions and you really want to learn this stuff, how I think about the market and how I think about trading. So I'm now rambling at the end of the video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one.